What a beautiful day today. Water's glassy, nice and warm outside. The water's actually warm. It's warming up quite a bit. I think you can swim in this for a while without a wetsuit now. I mean, it's cold, but pretty nice. Decided to take a little break today and get on the water, working on some new habits. And this one is nice because I can get away from everything on land and get a perspective, get a really nice view of the city from here. And a good distance away from everything to help kind of clear the mind and get some relaxation, a little bit of exercise. I've been learning about some healing stuff. It's kind of obvious that I've been on a healing journey for a while. And I've learned a lot. And one of the things that has come up recently as I continue to work through this stuff, which is just old patterns from childhood trauma brought forward, and some traditions that say this is ancestral trauma we're bringing through from our genes and energy fields, all of the ancient traumas that haven't been processed yet. So each person has the potential for healing these wounds, these ancient wounds that come through. So it's not just my stuff, it's my family's stuff, it's my ancestors' stuff. And that makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, we get born and we inherit these genes, and which are just these energy patterns. And my feelings are that the scientists can't actually tell you what makes up genes, and I experience it just as these energies, these thoughts, memory that comes through, and it comes through our ancestors, our whole lineage. And so, one of the things that I've been listening to this guy Richard Rohr. Again, he's a Franciscan monk, and he talks about the Enneagram in a really beautiful and elegant way. I'd recommend searching him out. Richard Rohr. He's a Franciscan monk again. And the Enneagram is supposedly based on ancient Sufi wisdom. So this is like 4,000 or 5,000 year old wisdom, where they recognized how our personalities were developed. And the personality maybe can be considered a defense mechanism or a survival strategy that we take on in childhood based on our imprints. So our nurturing, lack of nurturing, traumas, and so forth. And that really sets in those first 7 years, kind of sets in how we survive. And if you can imagine back in the days of clans and cavemen and different cultures, where you had your clan, you had the other clans, and that particular clan, like, you had to learn how to survive, and so you develop your strategies. In modern days, we don't really have that anymore, but we still are sort of these ancient animals that need to learn survival. And so if we grow up in an unsafe environment, we have to create a strategy. And so these sort of get locked into our personality that then as adults become our habitual way of being. So a lot of it is unconscious because we're not even aware that we're doing it. We just say, this is me. And so we come to accept, like, okay, this is me, but not being aware that it's actually this pattern of survival that we've taken on and identified with. My particular case, I'm a 9 on the Enneagram, and 9 is a peacemaker. Generally scared to death of confrontation because it might mean that, you'll be rejected, or someone will go away, or something of that nature. And Richard Rohr was talking about these energies, and there's like I think it's a 6, the 9, and the 1 of the 9 styles that are gut types. I could be a little bit off on the numbers, but they're the gut types. But he describes existence for these numbers as like every 3 minutes getting hit by a truck. It's this full frontal assault of energy. And as I've been noticing my patterns and habits, what I started doing, instead of doing my habitual patterns, which would be like at a certain time, crack open a beer when getting home from work, or every time I felt a little antsy, I'd go down to the bar and I justify it, say I'm socializing, getting stuff, but really, as I started to realize, as I started to not act on the impulses, or seek out sex, or some way of coping with this intense energy to get relief from it, is I started to notice, like, holy shit, this is intense. And so now that I'm not doing that, most moments of the day, I feel like I'm going to explode. There's energy surging through, and not violently, but just like be annihilated. Um, to my head, my arms, my legs, like my stomach, everything is just so intense. And I've been playing around with this and noticing that, um, and remembering, because I've had something happen before in meditation where I realized something. But I've been noticing that with this intensity that I'm experiencing, it's so easy to get caught up in the story. And one thing that I want to point out is our feelings and the stories don't correlate. They're not related. They don't happen at the same time, although they appear to. There's a tiny gap, like 1/10,000th of a second in distance between thoughts and feelings. But as we're identifying through the body, we seem as if we're in one house. But this house, as Gurdjieff would say, has different rooms. And so there's this emotional room, there's the intellectual room, there's a feeling room, and there's some other space, some other room in there. And they're not one big room. And so as I've been playing around with my stories, I've been noticing, like, oh, this intensity, it's not related to the story. But what we have a habit of doing is saying it's all one. And so the story and this intense feeling, and it's negative because it's uncomfortable, and then I say it's you. You did this to me. When really something was happening and I got caught up in trying to push away the intensity. And so it creates a non-wise situation. It creates a dramatic situation to where we're not relating with things properly. And I talk about myself, I'm talking about my own story, but also acknowledging that I'm not different than anyone else. So I would like you to know that's, as I share my own story, it's an opportunity for you to reflect on your own and see where this holds true in your own experience, because we're not different. We all share the same experiences, not the same exact experiences, but there's fundamentals in life that are constant. There's universal cosmic principles that are at play, and those don't deviate. There's not one person that has a special situation that no one else experiences and it's different. That's part of the ego trip of saying that saying I'm unique, different from you, and that's just not true. So I share my story, but also my story is your story in a way as well. But it's just, we each have our story to tell. So the practice that I've been playing with is just accommodating space for the intensity and working on letting go of the story, excuse me, that's in my mind at that time, because the energy's still there. The story goes away. I can think of different thoughts, and the energy's still there. So the practice is to accommodate it. Accommodate it, because these energies they're intense. But what the interesting thing about understanding this, and then understanding the styles of the Enneagram, is that we have different ways of relating with it. So mine is the gut type, and what the gut does is everything's so intense, we go into the intellect. And so what I would do is I would learn more and more and more about this stuff. I would try to understand it. I would intellectualize it, and that keeps me out of the intense feeling of just being with this massive intensity of this internal rupture that might happen, if I was present to it. And there's other numbers that are, say, the heart type. They relate with the heart. Their wisdom is in the heart. Except what happens is, instead of it being the outgoing heart that's radiating out, it's actually extracting. And so there's what you'll sense is a manipulation behind it, and a sort of deviancy that you might not be able to put your finger on, but it's like we relate the opposite of what we really should be doing. And what I can describe of this, maybe try to draw a picture of what it looks like, is there's an undercurrent to our actions. And so on the surface, our actions look a certain way. On the surface, it looks as if, say, like people that know me would probably consider me pretty social, easygoing, easy to get along with, um, and have a certain persona. But what they don't see is deep inside. Um, it is so much effort for me to reach out, to connect, to have to actually be present because it's so intense. And so to have these connections, it's just the energy in my body is so great that I go into my headspace. And I think people that know me well would also agree with that too. Um, that's and that's my defense mechanism from this intensity, and that's what I'm working on is actually being able to embody the intensity without getting into the headspace, because really what we want to do is embody ourselves. And the heart space people, I think that's a 2, and I forget the other numbers that are attached to it on the Enneagram, but their heart space is actually locked up based on their traumas and so forth. So the appearance of the heart, and they'll tell you that they lead from their hearts, and while on underneath everything that's true, but there's that manipulation that goes on because there's that lack of belief of it. Like mine, um, I have an appearance of being this social guy and outgoing and stuff, but deep down, I don't believe that I deserve it. I don't believe that people value me and that I'm worthwhile to be around, because that's what I was taught. Um, Not on purpose. I'm not. It's just like, our parents were traumatized too when they raised us. So like they're not really to blame. As adults, we get a chance to take responsibility for our own personal growth and development. And, that's this path. Um, but the fundamental feeling deep down is this undercurrent that's pushing behind me, the motion, the subtle relationship with things. So there's the outer appearance, but there's the inner drive. And the inner drive, in a way, is to get our needs met that weren't met when we were, say, in development. Like, um, what they found is, 0 to 7 is usually, like embryo to 7 is usually the development of our strategies, our survival strategy that becomes solidified. And if you've experienced trauma or neglect or something and haven't had proper nurturing afterwards to heal, release from the energy and heal it, it gets stored in the body. Um, One of the things that can happen with this is eventually unhealed trauma turns into disease, illness and disease in the body. It shows up as car accidents, things like that seem to be outside of us and out of our control. And, like, you've got cancer that's this unresolved anger. Um, all sorts of illnesses and mental conditions are these underlying, unresolved energy patterns that haven't been released, that at some point need to be addressed, or it'll literally kill you. Um, Louise Hay has a really good body of work on this. Heal your body, heal your life, and she's sort of like this intuitive master. And I've meditated on her work and found that every injury I've ever had related to exactly my relationship with life at that time. And so now when I get injured or something, I do a stop and check in and say, like, okay, what am I avoiding here? And it generally is very accurate, because when I can get clear on it, it's like, yeah, I'm not taking action on something, or I had certain thoughts, negative thoughts or something. And I know people have a lot of resistance to this idea, but if you're really honest with yourself, you start to see these connections, and they're very subtle, very deep. So, um, anyways, getting out on the water now is really nice to create that space to reflect on it. And as I'm learning about the body and the mind and the brain development and stuff, doing something active is good for dopamine. And this time, when you're doing it consciously, it's not dopamine to avoid something like in the past, where it'd be a lot of physical activity like running and stuff, but it was not knowing that it was regulating emotions. But now this is a chance to just check in and connect and to actually feel the discomfort of everything and allow it to be as I'm engaging in something in the world. So that would be something that's good, especially if you are working on a healing path. Something really good to consider, and sometimes it takes effort to step out and do it, to actually just get like your feet on the ground and go out and do something. But it's really good. So Um, I had something else I wanted to talk about, but maybe I'll do that later. I'll just keep working on these and try to share what I'm learning because I do think that it's helpful. What I found is that as I'm on this healing journey, is I'm now coming across other people that are on their healing journey as well. Previously, I find myself in situations or relationships where um, it's like we always meet ourselves, and so I met myself where I was at, and so as I work on this stuff, I end up meeting new, beautiful people that are honest and acknowledging that there's pain, and they're working on coming through it and finding strategies and really opening their hearts up to the world. And that's important to me. That's one of my values. That to be engaged with people that are really open and honest and can acknowledge that we all have pain that we work through and work on themselves so we don't make others responsible for it and push them away. I've seen the patterns and how they've worked in the past, and it's good for pushing into this uncomfortable space of saying, these are the things that are important to me, and um, wanting and valuing those types of interactions because they're the most real. The surface stuff where you can't really talk and be vulnerable, um, that's not a relationship. That's just a game of avoidance. And for myself, I've come to a place where I honor and value someone that can be vulnerable and be honest without needing to pretend, and just acknowledging that it's all there. It's not perfect. It's like sometimes we might still get triggered, but it's also knowing that something's there to be worked with. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. I mean, I think what can really help the world is I think it's kind of obvious that the world is sort of a chaotic and strange place that has a lot of pain, and the way we help the world is by working with our own pain. And that's one of the motivators. So let's get back to those unconscious motivators for how it might work. Is is generally what we do is we try to change the world in order to not feel the discomfort. And when you sit with discomfort, and I know this happens a lot with, especially with the meditation community, is as they sit quietly with the discomfort, they start to notice an impulse, and that impulse to want to change the world and radicalize it, and realize how much that what they see in the world is related to what's happening inside of them that they're trying to run away from. So it's actually really important to take time out for yourself, um, not as an activity that you can go and tell someone about and brag about and stuff, but as an activity to check in and to just be really present and notice subtle energies, the impulses to move and to act, and to see where that comes from. Because then you can start to resolve it, and then you can start to use methods and tools that help to redevelop new patterns and new habits that are beneficial for everyone. So on that note, I'm going to check out of here and spend the rest of the time on the water here by myself in quiet and some appreciation for everything that's here. All right.